Vacation destination list, part 2. This part we will add the JavaScript. And I'm picking up exactly where I left off after part 1. In part 1, you created the HTML and the CSS, and you should have a page that looks like this. If you don't, please go back and make sure you go through everything to make sure that you get a page that looks like this before you start. And you've got all the elements in there correctly. Everything's spelled right. Okay, so now we'll write the JavaScript we need to actually create this, make this little application work. To start with, let's grab the actual destination details form and put that into a variable called details form. And then we'll have a event listener for when that form is submitted. And instead of running an anonymous function, we're actually going to run a named function called handle form submit. And then we'll start writing the beginning of that function. So let's get started with this right off the bat. Over here, I'm going to open up my script file and add a variable var destination. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. I'm going to do it details form equals document dot query selector. And I'm going to go get this pound details. No, this one's destination form details. I think. Just check that really quickly here. Yeah, this form here, destination. In fact, if you want to be absolutely certain you spelled everything right, it's always a good idea, especially with these long names, to copy and paste that. Note that I'm using a pound sign here because I'm using query selector. You could also use get element by ID. But that'll get that form and put it in here. And that's great. So now we can do an event handler for details form. Oops. Details form dot add event listener. And we're going to look for a submit event. And then instead of just doing function like we've done in the past, I'm actually going to have a named function here called, what did I call it over here? I called it handle form submit. So that's going to be a function that runs when this form is submitted. So now we need to define that function. Function handle form submit. And this function, we're going to pass in the event object and do event.preventDefault. There we go. So that'll prevent the default submission of the form. You might wonder why at this point I've opted to create a named function here as opposed to just the inline function. And it could be an inline function. There's no reason why it couldn't. But this function is actually going to do quite a number of things. It's going to be a longer function. So I think it makes sense. I think it's a little bit easier to read in the long run if this is a separate function, since it's going to be a little bit longer. And that's just my own personal choice and my own style. You could certainly use an anonymous function here and not have a named handle form submit function for this particular project. But that's what I kind of like. Because what we're going to do here, if we go back and look at this is going to extract out the value from each form field. We're going to clear out all the form fields. So when you've filled in the form and submitted it, you need to clear out those form fields so that you're ready to make another card. And then we're going to run a function that creates the new card. And then if needed, meaning there's not already a card over on the right-hand side of the interface, we need to change the header at the top of that destination list and then actually add the card. And you could go back to the flow chart from the previous version of this, from part 1, and actually see how that's going to all come together in the flow chart there. So we start with event prevent default to keep the normal submission of the form from happening, but then we're going to do all of these things. The first thing on our list of tasks to do is to get the values out of the fields from the form. And to do that, we can create a variable for each of the 4 form fields, the name, the location, the photo, and the description, and then go and get the value out of those from the actual form. And you'll remember over here when we created this form in the HTML, we made it such that these fields were required. So if you try to click add list without filling in anything, it's not going to do anything because of that required thing, at least if you're using Chrome or a modern browser. And we can get more into form validation and making sure you get good data into forms in the second course in the specialization. But for right now, we just want to do something quick and simple, and we've got enough there to sort of keep it from at least being empty, even though we're not doing very much for that. And what we're going to use here is we're going to use event. The event.target will be the form submission, right? Because that's the event target, or the form itself. And then we can get the elements property and pull out each one of these elements out of the form and its value and put them into a variable here. This target.elements is something, the dot elements refers specifically to form elements. And you can come over to the MDM and look at HTML form elements, dot elements, and find out more about what this is. But it'll get you a specific set of elements specifically from forms. And so it's kind of a helpful little property here that we can use to get specific elements out of a form and get that data. So let's go ahead and put that onto our script. So over here, I'm going to do var destination name equals event.target.elements square bracket, because which element am I going to get? Name. And that'll get me the first one. And I can just copy this and paste it. Destination location, if I could select this. Destination location is going to be the location field. And then I'm going to paste again. Destination photo. Is going to be the photo field. And then paste one more time. And then we've got destination description. Which is going to be the description field. Actually, I'm going to shrink this down to ESC. And then don't forget, I forgot this already, we need to get the value. So we need to add dot value to each of these. And this one here too. Should have done that initially, but there we go. So that's going to do the first part. That's going to go in and into our form when it's submitted and get the values out of those fields that somebody typed in and put them into these variables here. The next thing we need to do in our list of things to do once we've captured the values from the form is to remove them so that the form is ready for a new thing. So I'm just going to use a for loop here to loop through the elements of the form and set the value back to empty. Down here you can see I've got just quote, quote. I'm setting it back to empty. So let's go ahead and add this next as the next thing that this function needs to do here. For, here's my for loop. For, and I'm going to have just a counter variable var I equals 0, while I is less than details form dot length there we go. Oh, details form dot length I plus plus. There we go. So that loop is going to go through details form. And remember, details form is going to get everything inside of details form there. And then what I can do in here is I can very easily say, okay, details form dot elements square bracket I dot value equals quote, quote. So we're going to go through the details form, and I starts at 0. And the first time through the form, it's going to say, okay, get element 0 from that form and set its value to empty. And then we're going to increment I from 0 to 1. And if there's more than one element in the form, then we're going to go through and do that again for element 1, setting its value to 0. And we're going to do that for each element in the form until the form is completely cleared out. So it's just a very simple for loop that's going to loop through and clear out each of the elements in that form. We've taken care of the first two items on our list. We gathered the information from the form and cleared the form out. The third thing to do is to run a function that creates a new card. And we're going to hold off on that because we need to write that function. But we can take care of the fourth thing, which is to check to see if we already have a card in the other side. And if we do one thing, and if we don't, we won't. We'll do a different thing. So we can take care of that in terms of the header over there and showing and determining what this header says here. Either it's going to say enter destination details, or we're going to change it so that it has something like my wish list in there, because that makes a little bit more sense once there's something in that column over there. So let's do that really quickly. We're going to make a variable. We'll just put in add create card here. So we remember we need to come back and do that. But I'm going to have var wish list container equals document dot get element by ID. And you'll remember we had an ID called title specifically so that we could do this. Over here in the HTML, you'll remember we have down here title on that ID. So get element by ID title. And then we just need a little if statement here. If Oh, whoops, I'm realizing I did the wrong thing here. I don't want the title here. I want to get the this ID down here, this destination container. That's the thing I want to check for. Destination container, I want to see if, because I want to see if, we'll do the title in a minute, but if wish list container dot children dot length is exactly the same as 0. So if there's nothing in this container, and over here we've added a card in here temporarily, we're going to get rid of that. But if this container is empty, then we're going to do something. If it's empty, then we're going to say, okay, document dot get element by ID. Now we want the title. Its inner HTML is going to be, what did I put in there? Quote, my wish list. There we go. And that will take care of the fourth thing, which is if we haven't added a card in there before, it'll change the title over on the right-hand side there. Behavior, it gets the data from the form fields and then clears them out. We have a placeholder for a place where the function that creates a new card is going to go, and we're going to write that next. And then we check and see if the header on the right-hand side of the page if there's already a card in there or not. And if there isn't, we're going to change the text inside that header over there. And then finally, the last thing that we'll do is actually add the card. So let's move on here. We're going to create a new function called create destination card, and it's going to take 4 parameters. And these parameters are the data that come in from the form that somebody filled out. So let's go ahead and do that first. So down here, I'm going to create a new function create destination card, and it's going to take name, comma, location, comma, photo, comma, I think I just did DESC for description. It's going to take those as parameters, although they don't get quotes on them. Name, location, photo, and description. That's right. Okay, good. So we're going to pass those variables in. And actually, I'm going to change this a little bit. I'm going to actually make this photo URL, and I'm going to type out description over here. There we go. And then I need to make var card, and this is going to be assigned document dot create element. We're going to create a div. And then we're going to take that card and we're going to set the class name equal to card, I think. Yeah, card. And if you wonder where we're going here, you can go over to the index file here, because we're basically going to use JavaScript to create these elements and put them in the card. So, so now we've just created this div here and given it the class of card. So that's what we've done. And this is going to be a long function because we have to create each one of these elements individually and put the content in them and then add them to the card. But it's not that long, but it's kind of useful to see how this is going to work. All right, so we got that. Next, we're going to add the image. So first thing we need to do is make a var called img or image or whatever you want to call it here. I'm just going to call it img. And then from there, I'm going to do equals document dot create element. And we're going to create an img element. And then images really should have an alt attribute. So I'm going to say img dot attribute now what do I want to do here? No, it's set attribute. That's what I need. Set, whoops, that's not set. Set attribute alt. And I'm just going to set it to name. So whatever gets passed in as the name of this location is going to get set as the attribute for the alt tag. So if somebody's using a screen reader, they will still be able to know what it's a picture of, even if they can't see the picture, if they've got a visual disability of some sort or another. Okay, great. So we're setting that attribute. We also need to set the source based on what comes in through this photo URL here. So we want to be able to set that photo source. But the photo source is not required. So the first thing we need to do is determine whether or not a photo has been brought in. And before that, we want to just make a variable var. And I think I call this constant photo URL. And I'm going to make that equal to images / signpost JPEG, because that's the image that's in this folder over here. So then I just need to see if photo URL, that variable there that gets passed in, did somebody actually add a URL in there? And we know that it has to be URL in there because over here in our form, we set this to type URL. So it'll only take a URL. Otherwise, you'll get Chrome barking at you and telling you that you didn't put in a URL. So we put a URL in there, and if one actually got put in, because it's optional, so if photo URL.length is greater than 0, I think that's what I'm doing. No, actually, I want to check and see if it's exactly the same as 0. If it's exactly the same as 0, then what I want to do is I want to set the image to src equal to this constant photo here. I'm going to set it to that. I'm going to set the image source to that. That should work. On my slide, I used set attribute again, so maybe I'll do that just to make sure. But really, this should actually work just fine. But let me just put this in just so it matches what I'm doing on my slide there. Set attribute src is going to be this constant photo here. Constant photo URL. And if that length isn't exactly 0. The else will be, okay, we're going to do image set attribute to not constant, not for the source there, but we're going to set it to photo URL. So if somebody put in a URL for a photo, it will get set to that. Otherwise, we'll use the default one that's in there. And this is unhappy about something here. Not sure what I've done wrong. I'm sure it'll come up sooner or later. Okay, so I'm not quite ready to test this yet, even though I'm picking up that there's an error on my script somewhere, but we'll find it in a minute here. But this should work for now, and then we'll pick this up in the next video. This function is getting long, and it's going to get longer because we're creating all of these elements here. So if you'll look over here in the index file, what we've created so far of our card is we've created this div and we've created the image. Next, we need to create this div for the card body and then add into that the H3, the H4, and then the description text. The description text is actually optional. If you come up here, you'll notice there's no required on the text area there. So we're going to have to deal with what happens if that's empty as well. And then we'll have to add the remove button as well. But let's go ahead and continue forward with this. So over here, the next thing we need to add after the image is a variable for the card body that's going to, we're going to make a variable card body and create element div, and then set the class name to card body for that. And that will create that card body element here. And then next we need to do the same with the H3 and the H4. Here's the H3, and I'm just going to paste it in. You'll have to type it, but I made var card title document get create element H3, so I've created an H3, and then I'm setting the inner text to the name. Again, this is the name that came through from the form. That's what's going to get put in there. So that's going to be the name. And then I'm going to append card body. I'm going to append child card title. So I'm putting the actual card title into the card body here. And then we'll do the same thing with the subtitle. Okay, so now I can add in the subtitle. And again, I'm going to paste this in so you don't have to watch me type it because that's getting kind of painful for everybody. But I'm going to make a variable card subtitle and create element H4. And then I'm going to set the inner text to the location. So that's this location that's getting passed in here. That's the location that somebody typed in on the form. And so that's what that's going to get set for the inner text there. And then I'm taking card body and I'm appending the child card subtitle. So that's going to add this to the card. So I'm appending that in there. So I've got card body and I've appended in the H3 and the H4. The next step is to check and see if somebody types something into the description, because it could be empty potentially, and we'll put that in next. Again, I'm going to paste this in so that I know that it's right. But here we go. If description.length is not 0, meaning it's longer than nothing, then we're going to make a variable card text and create a paragraph. And then we're going to take the class name and set it to card text. Because again, over here, remember we did that. We have P class card text. So I'm setting that class name in there to card text. So we could style it specifically if we wanted to. And then setting the inner HTML to description, and then appending that card text to the card body again. So we get that appended in. The next thing we need to add is the remove button. So we'll put that in here. So here I've got a variable called card delete button, and I'm creating a button, and I'm setting the inner text to remove. And that will create that button and set the text for it to remove. But then I need to add an event listener. I'm going to add an event listener. So that button is going to create an event listener, and I'm going to add an event listener called remove destination. We'll write another little function that will actually remove this destination. But I'm putting an event listener on this button right now as soon as I add it, and it's going to have its own event listener that's going to run a function. And then I take that button, and I append it. I append the card delete button to the card body. So again, if we come over here and look at the HTML here, you can see that this button called remove has been added to this card body. So the card body includes 4 items: the H3, the H4, the paragraph, and the button. It only includes the paragraph if somebody types something in that field, but it includes the button, and the button has an event listener on it that will run a function that we haven't written yet, but it's there. Okay, so that's going to put all of those things on there. Now, the next thing we need to do is take this card. We've been building up this card body. So we need to take this whole card body and add it to the card, because we added the image to the card. We created the image, and we set its attribute, and we set its photo. Maybe we didn't add that to the card. We need to do that too. And then we created the card. Yeah, we need to add the image to the card as well, but we need to add the card body to the card too. Since I forgot to add the image, let's do that first. So here we've done the image. We've got the image all in place. In here, we need to add card append child image. So that will put the image on the card. And then down at the bottom here, we need to add card append child card body. And then we just need to return card. So that's going to take this card object, or this piece of HTML that we've created that has all this stuff in it, and return it. Okay, so this is a long function that makes all of these elements and returns that card, which should be a big piece of HTML. Well, not a very big piece of HTML, but a piece of HTML that's this card here, div class card. And in it, we'll have the image, either the signpost image or one that somebody entered, a div called card body, and an H3 and H4, possibly a paragraph if somebody typed one in, and a button. And then that gets added on there. And then it gets returned. Great. We've got all of that in place. Let's save this, and I'm going to pick it up in the next. The next step in this process is to actually write the function that removes the card. And that's what this is going to look like here. We're going to make a function called remove destination. We're going to pass in the event object, so that when you click on that button, the remove button, that event gets passed through, the event object gets passed through. I'm going to say variable card event target parent element dot parent element. So when you click this button, I need to go up to this parent and then to this parent and say card remove. So I have to get up to that parent to actually remove that card. So I'm going up one parent to another parent to remove the card. So let's go ahead and add this function in over here. So down here I've got function remove destination. And it's going to take an event object, and I'm going to say var card equals event. Oh, no. Yeah, event. What did I say here? Yeah, that's right. Event.target.parent element parent element. So that's going to be card. Once I get all the way up there, I can do card.remove. And that removes that card from the DOM, we hope. Okay, cool. So we've got our remove destination function that's going to take in that event and then go up and actually remove that one. And that will get called here if you click on the card delete button. Okay, cool. So we've got all of that in place. The last thing we need to do is kind of put it together. Up here, you'll remember we had two things that we needed to do. We needed to create the card, and then down here, we needed to actually add the card. So let's do these two things, and then we'll be able to finish off this script here. So to create the card, what we're going to need is make a variable, destination card, and that's going to run. This is going to be using a function expression here. So we're going to use a function expression to create the destination card, passing in these variables. So let's do that. Destination card. Actually, I'm going to shorten that down to just dest card. Dest card equals. And then what I'm actually doing is this thing here. Create destination card. Create the destination card. So I'm going to put that in here. Create destination card, but what I'm passing in is the destination name. And I'm passing in the destination location. I'm passing in the destination photo to the photo URL. Oops. And I'm passing in the destination description. And then that should var, that's going to create, it's going to go in and create that. And then down here, now I just need to add destination card. So that's going to say, okay, destination card's going to actually hold that card. And remember, this function returns HTML. So that HTML for the card is now in dest card, because remember, that's what this function does. Create destination card down here at the end. It returns the card, which is the HTML for all the stuff in the card. So now all of that stuff, all that HTML we created is now in this little variable right here. It's in this bucket. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is go in and find our container and append the child, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Document.query selector. And what are we looking for? We're actually looking for this ID here. Quote, go get that ID, dot append child. And what are we adding? We're adding dust card. All right, cool. All right, great. Now we've gotten all 5 pieces of our script together. And in the next video, we'll do some error checking and fixing of stuff and see if it all works. Okay, so all along as I've been working on that script, I knew that there was an error on it somewhere, but I didn't have a chance yet to test it. And usually you want to test scripts a little bit sooner than that, but I could tell that there was an error here because of this one. And let's see what it is. And often you're going to have errors in your scripts, and that's completely normal. And you want to be able to find them. So I'm glad that that's in there. And we can come over here, and if I just refresh this page and then run the inspector, you can see up here there's an error 1. And if I look down here, it says on line 3, missing parenthesis after argument list. So let's go take a look at that and see if we can determine what's really wrong there. Because sometimes those error messages are a little bit cryptic. So if I come in here and go to line 3, I've got my add event listener, and I don't think I'm missing a parenthesis here, but I do notice that I should have a comma here. And I think that that will fix this whole thing. And, a lot of times scripts won't work, and you may feel like, oh my goodness, I'm completely in a quagmire of misery here. But you could be really close, because I think if I put in that 1 comma, it will work. If I'm off by 1 comma, that's pretty normal and can be kind of frustrating sometimes, but that's kind of the way life is when you're working with JavaScript or code in general. But let's see now if it actually works. If I come over here and refresh this thing, and I still have an error. Cannot read property of null on line 3. Let's see, what else do I have here on line 3? Handle form submit. Okay, so what I'm getting here is this cannot read property of null. And usually that means something is misnamed somewhere. So if I come back here and look at this, I think the problem is here, is that it's saying I can't put an event handler on nothing. That's what the null means there. So I think the problem is here. Destination details forms. I don't think there's supposed to be an S on the end of that. Let's come over here and check that. If I have my form here, yeah, it should be this ID here. It's always best to just copy and paste these just to make sure that they are exact. But it's really just the same thing without the S. Let's give that a try. And now I don't have an error. And I should be able to test this out. So I'm going to put a name of a destination. Let's try Boston. Or let's try Faneuil Hall. I think I'm spelling that wrong. We'll do Fenway Park. Destination location, we'll do Boston. Provide a photo. I've got a photo here for URL. And I could put in a description here. And click add to the list. And now I've got a cannot read property of 0 of undefined on line 14. So let's go back and see what's going on there. Also, while I'm here, I should probably empty out down here. I should get rid of this card. I don't need this one here anymore. So this one should come out altogether. Make sure you don't get rid of too much. They should line up here. This div closes down there. So make sure you're getting rid of just the div here. Like so. Make sure this one still closes. But let's go over to script to line 14. So I've got a problem here. Details form dot length. It's got a problem doing that script there. I value equals 0. I see the problem here is actually this needs to be elements. Again, an S. Off by one S. Let's go back and test this. So now I've emptied that out, so that doesn't have anything in there at all. Let's do this again. Fenway Park, Boston. We'll put my photo in there. Here is a description. Add to list. Oh, reference div is not defined on line 31. So let's go back and take a look at line 31. Line 31, var card, document create element div. Hopefully you can see right away what I did wrong here. It thinks that's a variable. That needs to be in quotes. Create element div. Either single quotes or double quotes, doesn't really matter. All right, good. So we're working our way down the script, clearing out errors. It's kind of a long script to test. Let's try it again. Now let's do Fenway Park. So I know how to spell that. Fenway Park in Boston. And maybe we'll get an actual thing here. Add to list. And look, there it is. We were able to add a card to the list. Now we can check and see, does the remove card function work? It sure does. So we can now add cards and remove them from the list. Let's try it again here. We'll do Fenway Park again. And we'll do Boston. Put in the photo that I have sort of in my form already. And then, what happens if we leave the photo out? Let's do that. No photo in there. See if the regular photo shows up. And it does. So that's the default photo. And that's working. Let's add another one. So over here, I did a quick search for New York. And I found this photo. Right-clicked and opened that photo up into a new tab. So here's a photo that I can use. I'm just going to copy that URL and come back here. And let's just do, let's say, destination name, Empire State Building in New York. And I'm going to paste that URL in for that JPEG. And then add a description, visiting New York. There we go, add to list. And you can see that it's appended that card, it's added it to the list. So now I've got two here, and they're both working. I can remove either one. If I remove this one, that one will go away, and the New York one will stay. Notice that the header here changed as it was supposed to change. So everything else is working. So here in this little application we've created here, and it's not very sophisticated. It's only got a few features, but we can add elements and remove elements on the page pretty easily with a little bit of scripting effort there. And this is a really great sort of capstone project for the end of the course here. Now, our last final pieces here are to refactor the script down a little bit and use our best practices. And we'll do that in the next video. Okay, now that we have a working project, which is great, and we had some errors, and that's normal, and I'm glad they appeared here for me because they'll certainly appear for you. It's very easy to end up with little mistakes, whether you spelled something wrong or used the wrong ID. There's a lot of moving parts with a little web application. Even one small like this, you have your HTML with IDs that things are hooking into. You have the styles where there's, different elements that are affecting the way the page looks. And then in the script, you're sort of manipulating many times both of those things kind of on the fly. And just for a quick summary of the script here, when you submit that form, what we're doing is we're running this handle form submit function, which is getting the values out of the form, clearing out those values from the form when it's done, and then going through and actually creating the actual card, and then after that, going in and fixing the header at the top of that container at this part of the page up here. Over here, fixing the header if we need to. And then after that, we actually put the card on the page. And the create destination card is a long function because we're creating each one of these HTML elements manually or individually here, having JavaScript create those elements and put the contents inside of them, and then add them actually to the DOM as they're needed. Plus, we have an extra function that allows you to remove a card. So that's one more extra piece of functionality that we have in this little application. The last thing to do is to kind of clean it up with our by adding our function up at the top here to enclose the whole thing, and then changing out the variables. So again, we would just do open parentheses and run an anonymous function with its parentheses and its curly braces, and then one more set of parentheses to make it run. So this will run when the page loads. So I can move this down and I can stick in here, use strict, and that will make sure that I'm not introducing any variables by accident in the global scope. And then I can take everything that's in here and stick it inside this function here. And I may need to tab it in once. There we go. And that should look good. So that should still work the same as before. We can test it. What was I doing? Fenway Park. Oops. I can't type. Boston. Photo, there's the Boston one. And that still works, so that's great. So we've got that. And then the last thing you could do is go through and replace all the bars with const or let. And they should be const as much as possible. So we can just put const there, come down through here. That's going to be const. That's going to be const. All of these can be const. Now this one needs to be let because that's actually in a loop. So that's going to need to be let. And then down here, this can be const. That's a container, so that's going to be const. 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 this one, this one. And if you're comfortable with this now, you can just start using const to begin with, rather than coming through and doing this at the end. And that's certainly fine as well. As you're new, when you're new at this, I think it's helpful to start with var and then come in and add const as you need to, or let. And again, let is for if the value is going to change. None of these other values are going to change when the script runs. Just the one inside the loop. I think that's the only one. I could be wrong. Let's just check and see if I am wrong. And if you are wrong, you'll get an error and you can fix it. So if I refresh this, type in Fenway Park one more time, Boston, and the URL. And look at that, it works great. Click remove and it removes it. So everything's working the way it should. This is a really great capstone project that sort of brings together everything we've done in this first course of this specialization. And I look forward to seeing you in the second course of the specialization, where we'll get into jQuery and creating all kinds of cool interactive elements on web pages.